Yeah, okay. Welcome back to 6 Years Later, a Leftovers Chat. I'm Ethan, that's Benji. I hope you know the score by now. We're watching the show with Benji, and we're talking about it a little afterwards. We've been doing this project for about 6 months now, I would say, yeah. We're rushing towards the finish line here. And I'm happy about it because we've reached Season 3, Episode 7, The Most Powerful Man in the World and His Identical Twin Brother. Last we left Kevin, he was saying goodbye to Lori, and he was prepared to do everything and anything he had to do in the nether regions, the hotel situation. And I guess we'll hop right into it. So this episode opens with the credit music from the theme from the leftovers of season 1. Watching it with you, I thought you looked pretty happy about that. What do you think?
Yeah, well, it's a theme I'm gonna come back to it a few times. I assume we'll both come back to it, but like I said last time, this whole episode felt like a big sort of compilation of the greatest hits of the leftovers, like a victory lap, sort of revisiting all these old haunts. And yeah, the music was a nice callback to season 1, so I guess it kicks off that, gets that ball rolling right at the outset.
It always feels like an adrenaline rush, especially towards the end of season 1 when you start to hear that, because massive things had happened. And I want to ask you a question real quick. You know that first scene with Kevin and Nora taking a bath, the flashback, which side note, that was the last thing they've ever shot for the leftovers ever, because he didn't need a beard, I guess, for that. And it's the origin of his beard story, right? It's the beard origin story. I like the way they did it with, what is that term that you keep pointing out every episode that I keep forgetting, where things look the same?
Graphic match.
Graphic matched. The graphic match there looked really good, but what would you think it would have been a bit more impactful if they did that scene with Kevin and Nora, and when he goes down, they go into the old credits, like an old cold open? Or do you like the way they did it?
Yeah, I think that would have worked well. I mean, yeah. Wasn't like I was watching it thinking, oh, they should have flipped the order on that one, like reverse. So it didn't occur to me, but I would have enjoyed that. Yeah.
Yeah. That's just something I think at this point they're getting credits out of the way and going into the story, but I would have liked that.
All right. About the bath conversation, are we going to talk about that, or is it?
I mean, yeah, this could be it. Instead of me reading this, we could just talk about it. You know, what's up?
Well, I just didn't want us to move straight past it, because I assumed there was a couple of stuff in there that, like, if they're going to give us this scene before this episode, you got to assume there's something in there more than just let's stick him in a bath. You know? And so I feel like the obvious link for Nora is the whole cremation thing.
Yeah.
Which is obviously, I don't even know if you'd call it foreshadowing, because it's not like we watched this before it happened. Like, time-wise, yeah, does come before, but it's just some kind of call out to Nora and the machine that a lot of people have speculated is pretty much sophisticated cremation.
You're saying that she's like sophisticated, so that's what you would want?
No, I'm just saying. I mean, it's basically, she says in the bath, she would want to be cremated, and then I was just picking up on the link that that's basically what the box machine thing does. So,
right,
it's some kind of foreshadowing. And then Kevin's comment about being stuffed, I found this one a little bit more interesting because it's slightly less of a clear parallel, and you have to kind of look for it. But there was a couple of things that it brought to my mind, like the image when he said that. And the first was back in the previous episode, where Laurie's talking about Wizard of Oz, right? And she's talking about the all the various people in there. And correct me if my Wizard of Oz knowledge is wrong, but there's like a straw man there, right? Who's kind of
Yes,
stuffed.
the Scarecrow for sure.
Scarecrow,
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So it's like I see kind of like a Wizard of Oz link there. I don't know quite how to wrap it all up a bit nicer, but I definitely see that link. There's also late in the episode, obviously the whole big thing about the key being inside Kevin, and I feel like that's got to be important. That the key's inside him. He's talking about being stuffed here. He gets called out about being a puppet by Meg later in the episode. And obviously, puppets are, stick sink inside them. So
Right.
there's a few things I felt like.
Yeah, no, I get all that, and there's so much of that in this episode, and this episode, and I'm totally cool if we have more of a free form conversation in this way about this particular one, because there is so much, and there's so much that's, I like hidden things for sure. But there's so much that's not hidden. It's laid out so plainly that that's one of the victory lap aspects of this episode, along with some of the humor, which we will get to. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Cool. Is that it on the tub scene there?
Yeah, I think so. There was also the comment by Nora, which reminded me again, just another callback, basically, one of many, about the loved one's doll incident from the episode Guest.
Mm-hmm.
And she's talking about having Kevin as like a stuffed whatever in the room, and I feel like that's it's another callback. So.
Mm. But what I really like is that they're showing these like happy times when like Lily is still there. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And they get mildly annoyed that they would have to go check on a baby. But I mean, all parents do that. Full disclosure. So, but I like the way it goes back there, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
So we do have a graphic match right there as Kevin goes under the water. He's on the teeter totter and he's going down. And the passed out apostles wake up in a surprise. The day of the flood is here. Senior thinks Laurie's talked Junior out of the plan, and they run outside to find him on the teeter totter. He is pulled out of the water after a quick review of his tasks, getting the song for his father, sending John's love to Evie, and asking about Grace's children's shoes. He goes back under. Kevin loses consciousness, and our familiar music starts. Right? Did you have anything on these people and what they're doing to him and their behavior right now? Because it's very bothersome to me.
Well, I mean, the whole they make such a big deal out of pulling him out of the water and kind of saving his life, right? They take him out of the water, but it's only so they can say like, "Oh, did you get this? Like, did you remember to put this on the shopping list? Like, okay, you can go back now." And it's not really about Kevin; it's still about them. So it's bizarre.
I believe at the time, I was so mad, and watching it again, I'm still mad at their selfishness. Do you know what I mean? It's really, really, really annoying. How little they're thinking about him and what could happen to him, as long as they each get their answer.
Mm-hmm. I noticed visually when we open with John on the floor. Don't know if that reminded you of I guess it's the start of this season, right? When Evie's lying on the floor in the GR place.
For
And there's
sure.
a couple of instances in this episode of John and Michael lying on a wooden floor. and a lot of callbacks to the prologue actually, in which somebody lies down in, I think it's like
And
a church building floor, right? Which is eventually what we come to in this episode.
this whole episode is full of callbacks to the Millerites at the beginning. There's that. There's stuff later. And I don't know if it matches in the same way it matched with the International Assassin and the Cave Woman, just in different aspects. But yeah, man, it's all over this place. That's one I didn't think about either. You know what I mean? So the music blasts out, and Kevin rises from the ocean, is immediately dragged out of the water by a Russian thug. Kevin is saved by Dean, and they go to his bungalow, where Dean immediately breaks the mirror. He warns Kevin about reflective surfaces and gives him his mission to kill the President of the United States. Kevin asks to find his list of people. He gets an earpiece with mission control. On the other end, it is David Burton. We find out that on the bridge, Burton whispered to Kevin that he is the most powerful man in the world. He is told to look into a reflective surface, and when we see him, then we see him in a white suit and a full beard. So, Dean back again.
And this is another like, I mean, it's just like, I don't want to overuse this word or set of words, but it's just like victory lap, because Dean is so. I was so annoyed when Dean got taken out of the story so early in this season. And I was like, oh, I guess that's it. I guess we're not seeing Dean again. Lo and behold, Dean's here. And then later on, obviously, we'll get a bunch of different characters that we probably thought we weren't going to see again. But I think this is the first of them. And I mean, I was happy to see him because I've always liked Dean.
Yeah, and he saves Kevin Harvey in air quotes, from the Russian, who I think is mentioning something. He killed his brother. And he shoots the Russian in the head, the same way Dean was shot in the head. In turn, the way Dean shot the dog in the head in the pilot.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, we're going full circle on that.
Yeah, and a lot of this particular voyage that Kevin undertakes in this episode, for me, this one felt more like some kind of weird journey through his own subconscious than it did in International Assassin. In International Assassin, even though it was bizarre and kind of crazy on one level, it also felt strangely real, and like he really was in this place. And whereas this time, it feels more like a weird dream where all these returning characters, faces he's known, things that he's seen happen, start coming up in weird ways and in the way you would expect in a dream when it doesn't really make sense, but you go along with it. Obviously, there are some elements of this that we can argue for it not being in his subconscious, I guess. And I don't know, but of the two of them, this one definitely feels more like that for me.
And I have to agree with you. And like I said, we can jump around or everything. I mean, when this was first going on, everyone knew he was kind of going back here. So we're wondering who he was going to see here. And when everybody, and we'll skip to it, we'll get to it, when he said he had to pick a Secretary of Defense or the Vice President was going to come in, people all over the place were thinking they were going to see Lori. Because they thought it definitely was something. But I think you're absolutely right. I think this is 100% in Kevin's mind, which makes the scene with him and his dad that much more sad when we get to it. You know what I mean? The middle scene with the sad, not the last one, which is also sad. But I totally agree with you.
Mm. Yeah.
Now,
Sorry, I was just going to quiz you. You mentioned the Russian, and you said something about a brother do you mind like expanding on that a bit? Because that was one element I was just confused by.
Well, I don't know if it was his brother. I mean, I didn't know what he said in Russian, but he killed a Russian in the hotel room.
Oh yeah,
An international assassin. I thought it was a Russian. I don't know. I thought he said something about you killed my brother, Kevin Harvey. You know what I mean? So I just put those things together. You know what I mean? Yeah, that's all. Maybe you can tell by the tracksuit. Like I'm wearing now, tracksuit. Yeah.
The I think that's about it. The moment he comes through the water though, the ocean,
Yeah.
and you get the I don't know, is it called Vapensiero?
The
The
full chorus of the Hebrew slaves.
Chorus, right?
Yeah.
And it's like this is the moment it's like, okay, we're doing this again, and you just like buckle in, and you're just ready for it.
And there's no, they make it so like there's no question about what they're doing, right? And it's just it's exciting. You want to know what's going to happen next. I'm curious to think about what this revelation that Kevin was told on the bridge. Another question that I never really expected to get an answer to. You know what I mean? All of a sudden we have answers to things that we weren't expecting and that they had trained us to put in our pocket and not worry about. You know what I mean? But now we're getting things here and there. I wonder if, that leads to us getting answers to other things later in the series.
Yeah, well, there's when you say later in the series, it's not that much more to go.
Nope.
So
Nope.
Yeah, I mean, we might.
And Mission Control is David Burton, and he tells him the opposite. And I've heard on other podcasts say when you look into a reflective surface and all of a sudden you're somewhere else, it's kind of like regular dream stuff. What do you think of that little? Did you have any thoughts about that little transportation trick that he does this whole episode?
Well, it's very useful
Right.
for the plot to work, but it's really cool as well. It's not. To me, it didn't feel gimmicky at all. It just felt. It's just cool, man. You're just watching it, and it's like, yeah, okay, why not? And every time it does it, it like hits you with a blast of music when it happens, and it's like, I don't know, it's good. The way it does it visually as well. Sorry, when like just the way the camera picks it up, and you see the eye here, and then it like flips, and it's just so well done.
I just want to point out a couple more pieces of information we find out in the bungalow. We see Kevin is writing a book, untitled romance novel. We find out Christopher Sunday is the Prime Minister of Australia. We also find out that in this world, when Kevin has a chance to gather his thoughts, he's kind of a master, a Neo, if you will. He's able to say exactly who he needs to see. And he also notices a little scar over his heart. And if you remember in International Assassin, there were the nurses walking around with the organ in the freezer in the cooler, and they were mentioning something about someone's heart as well. Lots of little callbacks there.
Yeah, I remember that because I spent like 20 minutes talking about how the biohazard symbol led me to a page about Dan Brown's book that referenced Dante, and I remember the hearts. Yeah.
Right on.
But the book thing as well, it took me until the second time watching to realize something about that book quite important, I think, that we'll get to when we actually talk about the second scene where they reference the book. But
okay, and actually, I would like you to be mentally prepared because there's a section in my notes where I wrote down a paragraph from the book, and I really would like you to read it instead of me.
Okay.
Not the whole thing that he reads, just a little paragraph. All right, so boom, he looks in the glasses, and he's dressed all in white, and he's got a beard, right? Full on. Kevin gives a speech. Halfway through, he realizes he is the president. In the audience, he sees Grace's children. Liam Playford is asked why he and his siblings aren't wearing shoes. Kevin does not get an answer, except why does it matter? But you said there is no family. Just then, Evie comes out protesting. Kevin's Secret Service agent, who is the Australian Kevin killed by Grace earlier in the season, rushes him to his limo. He demands to see Evie. She brings him to the car. And here I have an audio clip. I actually have 4 small ones this week. You ready?
Mr. President, it appears Ukrainian separatists have taken control of an armed nuclear submarine, and they'll have launch capability within 2 hours. You're being brought to a bunker, which you will access with your unique biometrics. Once inside, you'll be...
Sorry, my unique biometrics?
Yes, sir. The door can only be unlocked by you and you alone, unless you have an identical twin brother, which would be ridiculous.
Yeah, that would be ridiculous.
Sir, do I have your permission to move us to DEFCON 2?
What DEFCON are we at right now?
We're DEFCON 3, sir.
DEFCON 2's worse?
Yes, sir. It's worse.
Let's just stay where we're at right now until we have more, intel.
All due respect, sir, I don't think the Secretary of Defense is going to be happy about that.
Yeah, well, fuck the Secretary of Defense.
Well, I wanted to play a clip because I've picked some clips today that were funny, mostly, and things I didn't want to talk about in exposition because they don't matter, like Ukrainian separatists. The connection for the Ukraine I made is Patty's answer on Jeopardy. What is the Ukraine? Or what is Kazakhstan? The Ukraine is the answer the person got wrong on Jeopardy. Mm-hmm. The fact that, there's this play on movies where they say DEFCON 4, DEFCON 1, but it always gets confusing as to which one means what, as far as I'm concerned. Anyway, mm-hmm. If called upon, I would not be able to answer that. And there's one more thing there, but we'll go back to that. Well, no, I'll just mention it and then we'll go back because it's very small. When he's walking and you hear that music in the background, to me, that's very reminiscent of a certain scene in Godfather 2 where the main character, has killed someone else and he's walking on the streets on top of the buildings in New York City, taking apart his gun and putting it in little spots. But when he's in killing the guy, there's a festival outside and there's the same kind of diegetic music coming in. And it really reminded me of that, which led me to believe that there's a lot of things in International Assassin that remind me of The Godfather. This is something very specific in this episode that's reminding me of The Godfather Part 2. Mm-hmm. And I'd love to watch those movies with you.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, because and then obviously later there's the whole. I mean, they literally name drop The Godfather Part 2. It's one of the security questions. Yeah, that's because I picked up on when they mentioned The Godfather as one of the security questions, and I was like, oh, there you go, Godfather. I remember we talked about Godfather for International Assassin, but I hadn't. I don't have quite the same level of granular knowledge about it as you do, so I didn't know we were talking just about Godfather 1 that time, whereas this is more Godfather 2. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, and I'm very confused because I'm watching The Sopranos and there's lots of Godfather references in a dream episode I just watched, so everything's shooting around in my brain. Did he go to the bathroom in International Assassin to look for a gun behind the toilet?
Yeah.
He did. Yeah, that happened in The Godfather Part 1. Mm-hmm. Where are you at on this speech?
It's sort of like a whole big wrap up of it's like a combination of this weird dreamlike speech that you could imagine. You can imagine dreaming this to an extent, and you're saying stuff like that. But it's also, again, this greatest hits victory lap where it's G'day Melbourne.
Totally.
This isn't my first time visiting the other side of the world. Every time I'm here, it gets harder to leave. Mm-hmm. I love the bit where he says, he talks about the jar, and then he says, but we realized those traditions were stupid.
Perfect. Yeah.
Nice callback to season 2. The essay contest, I didn't know if I was missing that. Is there a does that call back to anything? Is
No.
there
No.
any kind of
That not that I can think of. I think
okay?
he's
Well, I guess in that case, that one was just one of those that's so bizarre. It's like I was saying, that feels like a dream where you're jumping from point to point where it's just relevant enough to the last point that you follow it, but it's still totally off the wall. And it's like that word association game where it's like you say one word, the other one says another word, and you start here and then you end over here, but you've been sort of linking your way through. That's kind of what it feels like. But the music, I really like the music. The what is it an original score that they use for this like presidential leftovers theme?
I don't know. I think so, unless it's some march that they got from somewhere else. Do you know what I mean? That kind of fits in with the Hebrew slaves thing to give you the same kind of like, because it's themes, right? They're using the one we're used to for the international assassin Kevin, but for the presidential Kevin, we're getting this one. That's a good question. I don't know. I should look that up. That's really good.
Do you have a favorite between the two?
No. Probably the international assassin one brings me more joy inside. But is it possible it's just a different version of that? Like arranged more
Maybe.
presidentially? I want to look that up too.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't be majorly surprised.
Right. But within this speech, I like the part where he goes, "I am the president." Like he's just realizing it. Well, he talks about marriage and how at the beginning our party thought um, marriage destroys families, but then he realized what about the children, and then Grace's children show up, and he asked them not in the direct way your mother asked me if your shoes. He says, uh, where are your shoes? We don't know. Does it matter? Well, someone in your family wants to know. Well, there is no family. So these children have gotten the GR message. They're on board. And Kevin checks a box office list.
Yeah, and this is one of the major hints to me that whatever's going on, it's either not on the same spiritual plane as International Assassin, because, and it took me to the second time watching to realize the significance of this. Those children were meant to be departures, right? But they're
No, yeah.
oh no, they weren't. They weren't. Sorry, my
Yeah.
bad. Because yeah. Okay, well maybe that does. Because I was going to say that would be like the nail in the coffin for this if it was. Because that I think what's confusing is that, and it all somehow still kind of, I feel like I can still make some sort of coherent point about this, is that John expects Kevin to find Evie in this place, and Grace expects him to find her children, and Senior expects him to find Sunday. But John thinks Evie departed, right?
He says he does.
Yeah. And that's why it's like, hang on, why is it that he's visiting? John expects him to be able to find Evie in this place, but he's also finding Christopher Sunday and Grace's children, and they weren't departures. So it's like, you'd think those are two separate places, and they're sort of acting as if it's all rolled up into one.
I think John thinks Evie is dead, but John is not willing to say it out loud. Right? Mm-hmm. I think almost when Kevin tells John that he gave the message to Evie, that's almost a big piece of closure for John, because I mean, does anyone show up in this world that we know for a fact is still alive?
Well,
Like,
it was
period.
when you say this world, if it includes International Assassin, I guess there was Mary.
No, I'm not. No, I'm not including that. I'm including this episode.
Just this episode.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't think so.
Dean's dead. The kids are dead. Evie's dead. Meg is dead. Patti is dead. Christopher Sunday is dead. Right. So, I really do think John is just not admitting out loud that Evie is dead. That's what I think is going on there. Mm-hmm. Now that I think about it, which I haven't before.
Well, speaking of Evie, that's a nice segue into the Evie appearance there.
Yep. Kevin delivers John's in the car. Kevin delivers John's message to Evie, but this is the quote-unquote hotel version of Evie. And instead of her being killed, she's the only one in her family alive. She tells Kevin that his words aren't his and asks him what he wants. It's the first time someone in this episode asks him what he wants. He starts to throw up water, and we are slammed back into the real world. So I sent you a picture of Evie in the car. Did you see it? In our channel a while ago right after we watched the episode. If you up close on that, there is a phallic symbol in the car, in the limo car behind her head. I don't know if it means anything. Could just be more Kevin Dream stuff that Damon Lindelof put in there to mess with Justin Theroux.
I see that. I mean,
it is there.
Yeah, well, I mean, it could be scissors. Maybe. It looks like
okay.
A sewing accessory kit, maybe. She had to make that shirt by hand, right? So.
Yeah. I think there's I love the transition back to in the world. What did you think was said in the limo?
Well, I don't know. It's kind of another clue that this is sort of not. It's not on the same plane as International Assassin, and it's in Kevin's head because obviously there's the callback to the red T-shirts and the Evie protesters, which Kevin saw, so that's in his mind somewhere, and the fact that it's not even like we don't think, at least I didn't, we don't think we're actually talking to the real Evie. She's not. The answers she gives, and there's a disconnect, right? And it's not like he's actually managed to find the real Evie. This is just his own sort of version of her, is what it feels like.
And she is a big part of his subconscious, if this is his subconscious, which I think it is. She's a big part of it. You know what I mean? He's probably thinking about her a lot. In the first episode of the season, we see him looking at the hole where they blew up the Welcome Center, where she died, and he's the one he sees in Melbourne, right? And he's the one, and she sees her now. He's got her on the brain, that's for sure. You know what I mean? And I think it might be important to him. Him and John are such close friends now, to get this closure for John. Also, she's singing a song, "Love Will Keep Us Together," which was in the third episode when Matt wins the money from the casino. That's the song that's playing when he comes back to town. It's "Love Will Keep Us Together."
Okay. Yep. Well, speaking of callbacks, there's also, I don't think we mentioned the other Kevin. Chief of Police Kevin, and that's weird. Okay, because no, I guess he has seen that Kevin, right?
He's on. I
was going to say he wasn't there for that time, but yeah, he was on the news. So
he's on the news, and
I mean, it is kind of weird that And I guess this is just a result of the fact it's a TV show and they had to do it this way. But somehow, imagine, right, this is in his mind. He somehow managed to reconstruct exactly what he sounds like, even though he never heard him speak. Which is like, if you were treating this as a bit more seriously than we are, you'd say that's maybe a hint that, like, how could that be in Kevin's mind? Because he doesn't know what he sounds like. But obviously, it doesn't even bear going down that route because it's a TV show and they had to hire the same actor, so of course it was going to sound the same.
And I have to I'll have more to say on Kevin in a couple scenes. Australian Kevin.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think this is just before actually, but you know when he's talking about the unique biometrics and it's completely safe unless you happen to have a twin brother, which would be ridiculous. Obviously, I don't know. I feel like even the dialogue in this world that he's in feels more surreal and
Playful.
mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're playing. The writers are playing. They're having a good time.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
But I love that line. That's it's a line that's made me like, okay, we're still on this ride, and it can be very funny,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because Kevin thinks it's ridiculous. We're watching it. It's ridiculous, and he said, and don't be ridiculous. Episode 2. So.
Mm-hmm. I noticed there's another graphic match. I think as Kevin. I love that shot. I agree. When Kevin he like sticks his head out the window of the car and it looks like it's like snowing, but the weather's kind of crazy, and then it switches back to Melbourne, and he's slow motion, sort of being pulled out by John and Michael.
Yep.
It's a good shot.
It's iconic. Those are in the trailers and stuff too, right?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Those are some of the stuff I wasn't in the trailers because you have all this build up to some kind of flood event, and they show it in the trailer, so it's coming at some point. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So that happens, and the apostles rush Kevin inside. He confirms he's delivered John's message to Evie and lets Grace know her kids do not know what happened to their shoes. Kevin Sr. did not get a song. With Michael and John trying to stop them, Sr. and Jr. lock themselves into the bathroom, having an extremely emotional and disturbing exchange as Kevin Sr. holds Kevin Jr. under the water. So let's go over this whole section in the real world.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it's easy to, at this point, when you're watching, it's easy to be the most annoyed at Kevin Sr., who seems still very selfish, and it's like Michael and John are saying, no, he can't do it again, and Kevin Sr. saying, of course he can, get in here. And so it's easy to be like, okay, well, he's the guy, he's the bad guy here, which is maybe true, but I feel like it's kind of letting John and Michael get off a bit easy because the only reason they're saying that is because they've already got what they want. And would they be saying that if they hadn't? Who knows?
Point of order, I have to say here, Michael doesn't want anything except everyone to get home safe. I think he thinks they're all crazy.
Oh, right.
He's trying
there. Okay.
Yeah, John does turn as soon as he gets what he wants. Grace's whole second reason for living here has been destroyed. She has closure. It shows she has closure, but it's not the closure she wants. You know what I mean? And they linger on her face for a second. But it's that conversation with Kevin and Kevin in the bathroom that really, it's not a tender thing like when they were talking to each other in the TV and International Assassin. It's like a really disturbing image of two allegedly mentally disturbed people giving into their delusions at the ultimate point. One thinks he can do these things and is willing to go back and drown, and the other one is willing to drown his son to get what he wants.
Mm-hmm.
And if you didn't think they were crazy before, watch their little exchange where Kevin says it has to be my unique biometrics, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he's like, is that supposed to mean something to me?
Mm-hmm.
And I always find it pretty sad when I watch that one.
Mm-hmm.
Hmm.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I don't know if the unique biometrics line itself didn't particularly make. I don't know if that was the saddest part. I found that more just bizarre. And it reminded me of a kind of it's like the inversion of season 2 when you have that tender moment between John and Kevin where he's saying like I don't understand what's happening. And Kevin says like neither do I.
Yeah.
Whereas this is like kind of the same, but it's just not. It's not the same, and it's like the opposite of that in a way. Even though you have a similar sort of dialogue going.
Yeah, and the reason I say the unique biometrics, not that line made me sad, but the fact that like if you're watching this from the outside, which we are, and you just get that snippet of this conversation with these two guys, one is clearly saying things that sane people don't say from a delusion. And the other one is saying, does that supposed to mean anything to me? I guess I'll hold you down now in the tub. Right? That's from my point of view on that one. And what is the Bible figure who gets close to killing his son? Abraham?
Yeah.
Speaking of some unique biometrics, you ready to get into some?
Yeah.
All right. After answering many questions and a scan of his unique biometrics, Kevin then picks Patti 11 to be his Secretary of Defense. After a momentous meeting with his former foil and adversary, Patti and Kevin go to the Situation Room where Kevin gets the nuclear football. The Vice President comes in. Patti makes it clear that she and Kevin will blow up the world because that's really what the people want. The Fisher Protocol is explained, and the Vice President leaves when she sees how determined Patti is. I got another audio clip for that.
It's an ethical deterrent. The nuclear launch key was surgically embedded into the heart of a volunteer in order for the president to be able to blow up millions of people with the push of a button. He has to extract that key by murdering the volunteer himself. But since I don't see that volunteer here, you can't launch shit. What?
The volunteer is coming through the east entrance of this facility in 15 minutes.
And how is he gonna make it through the security door?
He's my identical twin brother.
Patti convinces Kevin to go to DEFCON 1. He goes ballistic when she discovers he cannot call Christopher Sunday. Once they're in lockdown, he looks at Patti's glasses and leaps into his twin brother outside. All right. A lot to go over in that. First of all, the scene outside getting in to the lab with the questionnaire and the unique biometrics. Any thoughts?
Yeah, well, it's just this. It's a nice culmination to this running joke, or at least I hope it's the culmination to it.
Actually, the whole finale is just about that.
Yeah, I was gonna say like there's two ways we can take this.
It's actually the book of Kevin's penis.
I love the line. And I didn't get it again the first time. Anybody can copy your face, but your unique biometrics, they're not going to go to that length.
It's the smile. It's the smile the Australian Kevin gives after he says it, right? Uh-huh. He does an extra like winking smile, and the whole thing is a wink, even to his even to like, you know, his head security and the other guy in security both give a glance down, and Justin Theroux rolls his eyes like, here we go again. And this all kind of stems from that first season jog that he took that made the news from The Leftovers.
Yeah.
It was really hilarious. Everything about it, I thought it was hilarious.
Yeah. And then the security questions. We actually talked about it already, but The Godfather Part 2 being Kevin's favorite movie. That's like, it feels more like confirmation of what we already knew, basically. In International Assassin, he says, when he's talking to Virgil, he says, "Oh, like The Godfather." So obviously he knows the film.
Right.
The fact that we get confirmation here that it's his favorite, that they're some of his favorite films, suddenly it makes sense why it's woven so much into his psyche and coming up in this stuff. It's like, of course it would be like, this isn't it. Of course there'll be all these references because this is like, we're exploring Kevin's mind and that's his favorite film, and so here's all the references
and a bunch of questions only he would know about how they didn't have cats or stuff because his mother was allergic and weird things like that. But we do have a good. Go ahead.
The whole Godfather thing question that gets raised for me is, and I don't know if you were planning to bring this up at some point, but if we take it as a sign that this one is in his head, and one of the hallmarks, if you want to say that, of it being in his head is like a running theme of The Godfather, how much kind of doubt does that cast on International Assassin if International Assassin also has all that stuff going on? And here we're using it as a tool to say, look, this is why it's in his mind, because it's referencing his favorite film. But then if it's doing that in the other one, I don't know if I want to go that far and suddenly rule out that one as well, but that feels like the logical continuation, right?
It is, but, you know, man, maybe it's time to have this conversation I've been pushing off for so long. I think International Assassin and this happen 100% in Kevin's mind. The only thing that leaves me room for doubt is the conversation that he has with Kevin Sr. on the TV in the first one. Which I have to figure out a way to explain, some kind of, because I don't think Kevin was dead. I think he was close to death. I think at some point, with who they brought in to help write on the show, Reza Aslan and his works on shamanism and getting to that astral plane other side, I think that's the only time where it crosses over. But I think all of this stuff is 100% in Kevin's head, personally. That's my opinion. I don't think he came back from the dead. I think he came back from close. I think they did a lot of research on, you know, how far people can go and come back. I don't know if that answers your question, if that was a question that was being asked, but I mean, that's how that's where I land on it.
Yeah, well, I do feel like International Assassin has to be the episode that I feel like this one is not really up for a lot of debate. Whereas International Assassin, that's the one where it's like, okay, we can try and argue for both sides for this. And
maybe it goes to the fact that things were so murky in International Assassin is because they were murky for Kevin in International Assassin. Here he comes back here a lot, and he's kind of a Neo figure here, a master figure of this matrix that he's built in his brain.
Yeah. The thing about International Assassin is, I mean, I get what you're saying about the research and stuff, and I just don't know, because Well, for one, there's the whole like he literally drinks poison and gets buried pretty deep, and he doesn't get an antidote. So, like, when you say they researched how that would work, how would that work? Because I don't understand.
Well, I mean, I don't want to post verbatim things I've heard on other podcasts, but this is from the Bald Move following the leftovers of the research they did, is just from listening to them, is and you've never seen the movie Serpent in the Rainbow, I guess. Um, there is definitely, I think, based on movies and some research, voodoo type rituals that require um, uh, like a certain kind of mixture or poison for burying people alive, and it incapacitates them for up to 12 hours, and then they come back. So I'm pretty sure those things do exist. That's what we're talking about here. We just have to take Virgil's word for it, right? He's mixing stuff, and he looked like he was into some crazy stuff in his place, some crazy mixtures and everything. Um, he wasn't a scientist. He looked like a faith healer of some kind. Um, and that's my explanation for it. I don't think he drank poison that would kill him. I think he drank some kind of incapacitator that would put him under for a long time to perform some kind of journey, almost a vision quest, if you will, if you know about those in Native American cultures and peyote rituals and then ayahuasca and that kind of thing. That's what I think, and after I've thought about it a lot.
Yeah, I mean, I can see that. I think there's got to be two distinct avenues of discussion, and one of them is the physical, and like, did he physically die and did he physically come back? And a lot of that, you like you say there are, that feels like the lesser important part. The more important part is the mental side of stuff, and a lot of it comes down to, I guess, how much of what goes on in both those episodes could be explained by the information being inside Kevin's brain and being processed in this dreamlike sort of hotel, beach, city, whatever it is. Like, how, because that's really the big question, right? If there's stuff in there that Kevin couldn't have known before going in there, that would seem to be a pretty solid piece of evidence that there's more going on than it just being in his mind. If there's stuff in there that is, if you want, mind independent and it's like objective and it's stuff he couldn't have known, for that to then come up in this place feels I don't know, just something that you can hold up and say, maybe it's not 100%. We can't be 100% sure. It's not in. We can't be 100% sure it's in his mind. One of them would be, like you said, the conversation with his father, and I guess it's very convenient for the writers, so that there is no sort of definitive thing either way. The fact that Kevin Senior can't remember, because that's obviously important. If Kevin Senior had then said, when independent of meeting Kevin, if he'd said in the episode, and I was in this place and I saw my son Kevin, that would have been a pretty strong piece of evidence. As it is, though, Kevin Senior can't remember, but it very closely lines up, right? And we know he was on that drug that he talks about.
Yep.
And it seems like a pretty obscure drug. I don't know how many people, like, I don't know how Kevin Jr. would know about God's tongue when Kevin Sr. finds it, and it's this kind of niche drug he just gets off the street in some like Australian place, right? and so obviously that's a big one. I feel like the other big one is a lot of the revelations about Patti and how we have this like conversation between Patti and Kevin, and this like dynamic between the two characters, and how much of that stuff they talk about could Kevin have known about. And obviously we could talk about, and we have talked about how Laurie may have known a lot of that, but there's a lot of it that it's also conceivable she didn't know about, like the Jeopardy story. The interview you sent me that I watched, one of the things they said in there, if I remember right, was how
well, hold on. Let me preface the interview. Let me preface the interview, because I do want to get in this Patti stuff. Because right now, Kevin chooses Patti, right? And it's a greatest hits. It's a reunion show. Like, we're back. We got the band back together, and it's great to see her. And the next part goes. So I'll just point out the fact, I love the fact how she slaps him when he says he won't go to DEF CON 1. I love the reaction, and it's, I love seeing these two people together again. This past week, there was an interview done on the ATX TV Festival. I just happened to randomly see that it was happening that night from the Leftovers Reddit, and it was Justin Theroux and Ann Dowd, and they discussed the show and the Leftovers, and mainly the characters and their relationship as characters and actors through the entire series. And it was perfect for this episode. I cut out a little bit that talks about the next episode, and I sent it to you for you to watch. So you did watch it, right?
mm-hmm.
It was very emotional, right? Pretty emotional. They got a very tight bond. It was very fulfilling for me to see that they seem to care about the Leftovers as much as I care about the Leftovers. Do you know what I mean? And you could tell they did. But you were going to go, and I just wanted to mention that you were going to talk about that a little bit. I want to talk about
right. Because one of the things they talk about in that interview is how Kevin and Patti, it's this kind of love story in a non-romantic sense, and it's about these two people coming to understand each other and help each other, and how Kevin, the way Kevin is able to help Patti is his task is as gracefully as possible helping her find peace and being with her at the end of her life and helping her sort of come to terms with it and process stuff that she's had locked up inside her for a long time, and just sort of be there for her, right? And the way they talk about it, they don't talk, I feel like it's sort of it doesn't invalidate it, but to say all this is in Kevin's head and this is just Kevin's story kind of invalidates the part of it that's Patti's story, and her character can't progress if all this is about Kevin, right? This is a one-sided thing if it's all in Kevin's head, because that Patti, whatever the Patti says that he sees, it doesn't matter because that's not the real Patti. And I'm not suggesting it is the real Patti. I'm just saying if we go that route, it seems to not weaken, but there's not as much impact in the revelations that Patti gives, and like the Jeopardy stories and the piece that he is able to help her get to. It's like, it feels like there has to be a point to that is beyond it just being in his head, because what's the point of having this whole love story between them where he helps her come to peace if none of it really matters because it's all inside his head? You know what I mean?
I do. I agree, and it makes me rethink things a little bit, for sure. I still believe that, but you're right, and that's kind of what makes the shows great, is like the little ambiguity that's there, and all just because there's a one little scene between Kevin and his father. All this stuff kind of, for me and you right now, hinges on that one little piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I like it.
And I think one of the things they say in the interview is how Kevin, especially in that well scene, he helps her open up, and I might be misquoting, but he helps her tell a story that she hasn't told before, or it's along those lines. It's like this part of her that she's not really been able to come to terms with and she hasn't talked about yet, and he helps kind of coax that out for her, which also suggests this is maybe something she hasn't talked about with Laurie even. And so how could Kevin have known that, and how that's one story that Laurie didn't pass on to Kevin, because the whole point that Anne and Justin talk about is how Kevin helps her face this story, and he's like the person she tells about it, and it's this deep secret thing she's had buried for a while. If I remember right.
Did she actually say she told Laurie as an actor? She thinks she told Laurie or didn't tell Laurie?
No. Well, I was saying the opposite. I think from the way they were talking about it, they were making it sound like, because obviously they talk about the Jeopardy monologue in the well,
yeah,
and how Kevin. Let me see what the actual note was that I made for it. How Kevin helped her come to terms with that part of her, and like that story that had been sort of locked up inside her, and he helps her come clean, not come
full
clean,
circle
but
or whatever.
yeah, like he's just that. I don't know. He sort of plays the role that was Laurie's job, but Laurie didn't really do that job. He was the one who actually ended up doing it in the end.
Right. Yeah. No, it was very emotional interview, and I was surprised, and it was great. It was great to see those two talk about it. I love the look on his face when he realizes what's going on with the international assassin outside, and that he's going to be the member that they have to use the Fisher Protocol on.
Mm-hmm.
I believed we had talked about this before. The Fisher Protocol. Not the Fisher Protocol, but something about it, about when you're talking about Jeremy Bentham and his utilitarianism. Is that what it is? Does that relate at all?
I guess, yeah.
Or am I crazy?
I've heard of the Fisher Protocol. Well, I don't know if I've heard it called the Fisher Protocol, but that stuff they were talking about, I'm sure I've seen stuff about that. Like that premise is not a new one, right? The show didn't invent that premise.
No.
Yeah, it's not. I don't know. Confess to how ignorant I am of the deep intricacies of American policy, but that isn't a real thing right now, right?
No, I don't.
Well, I wasn't sure, because obviously they say the vice president's coming, and you sort of clocked onto the pattern at this point. You're like, okay, who's this going to be? And for a minute, I wasn't sure if it was going to be Nora, but then I guess that would have been stupid. And I guess Laurie would have been another candidate for it. But there's no point, really. We had our Kevin Laurie closure. So, like, who else are they going to call? Who would you have liked to see in that position?
I guess the biggest candidate to be in there would be Laurie, really.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Do you know what, if there's anything to the portrait of Kevin?
I mean, it's pretty amazing.
Like
it's pretty amazing.
You reckon they sell that?
I've looked. You can get things like it. There's all sorts of stuff out there.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you'll have a package to open on our last episode.
See. I'm excited. The whole nuclear stuff, right? I don't think we talked about that, but that feels like
noise.
Well, maybe, but also there's the fact that back in the real world, there's the nuclear incident that had happened, and it's probably very prominent in Kevin's mind. You know, it's like when you dream in recent events, and somehow it manages to find its way in. For sure.
And that's how maybe how the Kevin got in there too. Mm-hmm. The Australian Kevin.
You're right. You know. And I was kind of hoping. I guess it was too much to ask, that we'd have some sort of dog callback about Dean and having a dog in the White House and
Yeah.
dogs taking human form.
That would have been weird, though. This is a serious show. No.
Maybe that should have been the candidate for vice president. It's like a dog. Kevin's old dog.
That would have been weird. Comms?
Actually, one line before that.
Okay.
Sorry. The bit when Meg says he's being played.
Yeah.
That felt like a reference to Kevin being played. There's the whole conversation about their plan to end the world.
Yeah.
Which is kind of a big thing. I don't know. But
Well,
they don't really...
Well, I think Evie's right. He's a puppet. He's doing the work of the GR. He's the GR president, right? This is a big callback to the Bush years. The second Bush years with Dick Cheney. You know what I mean? Kevin wasn't doing anything he really wanted to. Who would volunteer to take a key out of their own heart, and their own brother's heart? That's what I think. That's what I think anyway. The assassin Kevin gets into the comms room by entering the bunker once again using his unique biometrics with the help from mission controls inside Man, the vice president. Kevin quickly drops his earpiece and kills Meg after she confesses that she has found true love in God. He calls Prime Minister Sunday, who explains that he already told Senior the dance was to bring the rain, not stop it. Before he's captured, Kevin is asked if he believes in what his father is doing. He says no, which begs the question, what are you doing here, from Christopher Sunday? Second time someone says, what are you doing here?
Yeah.
I was into the fact that he kind of stepped up more of his mastery of this world. He was like, I don't need this mission control here anymore. This is all bullshit. Get rid of Meg. Let's get rid of the earpiece. That kind of thing.
You know what I was thinking about watching this was how... I guess this is a question I want to bring up later on in the episode as well. But do you have any idea how they actually filmed this? In terms of getting Kevin, Justin, twice.
We'll get to that when we get to the two Kevins.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Because I just noticed that the weather looked kind of different as Kevin made his way toward the building, and I didn't know if that was... I assumed it was because they were shooting on different dates.
Yeah, sure.
But I tell you, one of my favorite shots actually comes in this section, and it's the bit you have like a huge wide shot, and it's Kevin, clean-shaven Kevin, coming down the stairs with like the music like swelling. That's one of my favorite shots, I think, this season.
Yeah, there's a lot of those with the those in that building. Those shots. There's one with Kevin. There's one with Patti. There's one with Meg. It's a beautiful location they found. It's all in Australia somewhere.
And it is quite a marvel that all of the... It feels like this season... I mean, I guess we could... Season 2 maybe, actually. But it's definitely been one of the most visually stunning seasons. Even though they've been working with the lowest budget, from what you told me.
Visually speaking, season 3 is the best season, I think. Especially just making the stills I've been making for our backgrounds here. Like it's really opened my eyes to like what's going on there. Do you know what I mean? And that's with the show also going into the world. You it starts in this little town, then it gets into a bigger town, but then it gets into Australia, which is just so big and so wide open, and you just have all these amazing shots. I still think that crazy white fella thinking shot with the charred corpse in the foreground and the sun and Kevin Sr. in the background is still like one of the best shots of the series.
I noticed the the code to get into the room. Anytime I've sort of learned now, anytime there's numbers or like a phone number or a code, an address, whatever that comes up in a Lindorf show, I try and pay attention. This one was kind of an easy one to remember. It was 6969 was the code.
And there's just there's always a lot of nods to Kevin's adolescent maleness in these shows, and that's just another one.
Now, I don't want to talk too much about Meg, because I've got a feeling you don't really want to either. But I don't know how much weight we even ought to give her statements where she's talking about how they're all liars and they say they don't feel love and pain, but they do. Because if we're sort of taking this as being in Kevin's head, this isn't even Meg speaking anyway, so do we even need to take this as any real indication of her character?
No, not of Meg's character in any way. What I think it is me personally. I am HO. Very specifically, we're trying to get to the heart, no pun intended, of why Kevin is there and what his main thing is. And I think we figure out very soon that it's Nora. You know what I mean? And when he says, "I'm in love too," and she kind of laughs at him or whatever, and he shoots her, that's getting to that. But yeah, I think at some point you're filling vacancies of people with faces, presenting different things. That mixing with them wanting to get Liv Tyler in the last season, in the last episode, I think that's when you get that. Meg. But you're asking me. I mean, what would you say it has to do with Meg's character?
Well, I mean, it does sort of call back to the fact that she's always been the one to buck against the trend of the traditional GR stuff, and she's the GR that talks and hangs out with Tommy, and sort of does stuff against the trend for them. Right. So I don't know, it kind of makes sense that she's once again just sort of going against what they say. That's kind of still in character for her.
And maybe Kevin put her in that box, right, in his brain.
Maybe not. And I mean, this whole point about we don't really need to talk or care about what Meg says in this because it's all in Kevin's mind. That's what I feel like the danger is when we sort of give it too much of this blanket. It's in Kevin's mind, because then if we start extending that to International Assassin, it's like, what does that whole conversation with Patti? Is that meaningless? Do we need to give any weight to that if that's all in Kevin's mind as well? And when we start treating one conversation like that, if we just extend that to all of it, then it's kind of hard to read anything into these episodes apart from Kevin himself.
Right.
And obviously we can talk a lot about Kevin, but that was sort of what I was getting at earlier about Patti as well.
Right on. No, and I totally see your point. And that's why I like the show so much. I know I say that a lot when we get to these spots, but that's why, because you changed my mind a little bit. Maybe I'm not back to thinking this is 100% in his mind. But even it begs the question, if I think this is 100% in his mind, that is not the answer for International Assassin. And we might get more clarification later on in the series. Maybe. Who knows? Okay, so.
Did we covered Christopher Sunday, right?
I said it. We didn't do some thoughts on it. I mean, he asks him what he wants. He tells him blatantly what he's already told Senior, which I assume Senior has already told people what Christopher Sunday said, and just said,
right.
"I don't."
Well, but you. That's what I was going to say. You'd kind of have to assume that, otherwise, it's back to this old. Well, hang on. How does Kevin know? How does Kevin's subconscious know exactly what Christopher Sunday said to Senior? So I assume, he must have related that talk.
But he's got those nice sad eyes, and he says, "I told your dad, but more important, do you believe it?" Do you believe what your dad is saying? Then why are you here? And that's the mirrored shot from International Assassin of him looking at his father really lovingly and say, I love you too. It's him looking into Christopher Sunday on that screen. The shot looks almost exactly the same. Kevin Garvey's face looks almost exactly the same. With that same like sadness in his face. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Like, why am I here? It isn't for this.
Mm-hmm. We get another callback to International Assassin, I thought, after that as well, with the fire alarm. Or at least it sounds like a fire alarm. It might just be a regular alarm. But yeah.
Kevin looks into another reflective surface, and once again he is the president. He is faced with Patti questioning him and smashes her glasses in a fit of rage. He argues that he is not the president. I love this fit of rage where he smashes her glasses, but this is another audio clip. Ready?
Mm-hmm.
I don't want to do this anymore.
Do what, Mr. President?
Stop fucking calling me that. I'm not the president. You're not the fucking Secretary of Defense.
Oh, yes. Yes, I am. You named me Secretary of Defense. You were asked, who did you want in this position, and you named me. You summoned me out of retirement, and I came back. Because I owed you. You helped me, Kevin. And now I'm here to help you.
Help me how?
Well, what do you want?
I want to go home.
Do you?
What?
It's just that you've been known to say that before, and yet you keep leaving home and coming here. I'm sensing a lot of internal contradictions from you, Kevin. It sounds like something you need to work out with yourself.
Doesn't get any more cut and dry than that for me. The writers, I think, just told us exactly what's happening.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and they talked about this on the interview actually, and I had jotted down, right. I'd made a note like, oh, remember to say how in the interview Justin and Anne talk, and they talk about how, well, you know, Kevin helped her before, and now she's helping him, and I was going to bring that up, and then I was listening to that, and I was like, hang on, that's literally the dialogue. So I've done that job already.
Yeah. It's just it's just great, and I honestly I don't think it needs explanation. She just basically says, she comes out and says, hey, this is something for you to work out with yourself. You keep saying you want to come back here, but now you're telling me you want a family. It's like he's doing again from the second season. He's trying to convince himself of something, or the first season.
Mm-hmm. Do you feel like this in any way weakens season 2? Not weakens it like in terms of the quality of the episodes, but the whole climax of season 2 is him just saying he wants to go home and singing Homeward Bound and going home, and there's that beautiful final shot where he's finally home. And then here, obviously he can't pull the same thing again. He can't just say, I want to go home. So we have this whole, takes it one step further than that. But if you were to go back and watch season 2, knowing what happens in season 3, does that in any way sort of weaken the impact it has in season 2 because you know it's not the full story? Or is it genuinely the full story in season 2, but it takes a bit more time for this to develop, and he genuinely does just want to go home in season 2? How do you think they...
I understand the question. No, I don't think it diminishes it in any way. I will tell you why. I'm a firm believer that this happened whether we saw it or not. We saw season 3 or not. You know what I mean? It's just when they chose to take the lens away from us, right? Almost like the end of The Sopranos or the end of any show. A big like thread that runs through all of the shows almost from the beginning of this kind of age of television is that, and all my favorite shows, Mad Men, Sopranos, kind of thing, it's if there is any change in people, it is very slow and very incremental, and it doesn't go very far after you reach 5 years old or something like that. You know what I mean? Because I think Kevin is of two minds, right? He is the person that wants to be with his family and stay home, but he is also the person that has to have these existential crises all the time. So no, I think at that moment, after what he had been through, the only thing he wanted to be right there was home. But I think he's a little mentally ill, and I think he's got departure woes, right? And I think all that mixed together causes another, on the 7th anniversary, causes another little psychotic break in him. So
right, I mean that's an important point actually, is that it's not like season 2 happened and then the next day he's out with the duct tape. Like it's a few years before we get this resolution.
Right. And so no, it doesn't diminish it to me for some reason. I wanted more leftovers more than anything. I got them. My expectations were so high. Some people think this is the best season of Leftovers. I don't. But it's got some pretty damn good stuff in it, as we've been seeing, including this that we're talking about right now. So yeah, I'm not going to go anymore. I'm just going to say no. I don't. I personally don't think so. Do you? Does it for you?
I guess that depends on how the season ends. But I mean, I guess that's more of a question of, does season 3 as a whole diminish season 2, rather than this specific point about what does Kevin want.
I think it goes back to the question that I think it goes back to the question and answer that Kevin Sr. gave him in season 1. It's like, there is nothing more. This is all there is. So, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, what it felt like was that he'd come to terms with that by season 2. And he had sort of internalized his dad's advice that this is enough. And so it feels like, because that was potentially, it could have been the end of the series, right? And it had to be a place where he'd reached that point. And so to take his character anywhere further, there sort of has to be some kind of regression and compromise in that. So I'm still not sure, to be honest. I think maybe if we have this conversation after we finish the season, because I'm still undecided on. Obviously, I'm glad the season exists because it's a lot of fun to watch, and like you said, more leftovers is good.
Yep.
But you can't really get any, and I guess this is something I've said before, but you can't get any more, what's the word, cathartic and beautiful a moment than season 2 finale. And so anything they did after that, like if you can't do better than that, it's always a risk. And I'm still not sure whether it's fully worth it yet.
Well, we'll pick it up after the episode, after the season. So in one of my favorite scenes, Kevin is unmasked and Patti sings the Patti Hearst theme song about the two Kevins, which is just an amazing joy to watch her sing that song. We are now faced with two Kevins. Patti officially explains the protocol, my last audio clip.
I, Patricia Levin, in my capacity as Secretary of Defense, hereby invoke the Fisher Protocol, overriding the HART deterrent. Pursuant to the Nuclear Command Authority, granted by Article 2, Section 2 of the U.S. Constitution, the President shall make an incision 2 inches below the sternum of the volunteer, that's you, whereupon the President, gaining access from beneath the rib cage, shall manually extract the launch key from behind the left atria. In recognition of his service, the volunteer shall receive a posthumous Congressional Medal of Honor, applicable if Congress exists, which it will not. May God have mercy on your soul, if there is a God, which there is not.
And I just want to play Patti getting her last little words in about God, really, for that. Do you know what I mean?
Is that the last sentence we hear from her? Is it? No, it's not.
No, I think it's something about let's go outside.
Yeah.
And I love the way the Kevins are looking at each other through this whole thing. I love the way they both scream, "This is bullshit. This is stupid," at the same time. It's just amazing. And let's read this one little part here. The Kevins and the Patti argue about the purpose, why they're there. Both Kevins think it's stupid. Patti brings out the untitled romance novel Kevin has written. There is even more arguing until President Kevin is forced to read. Do you mind reading this little paragraph I have up?
Yeah, let me just find it.
It's not the whole thing, but I thought someone with a nice British voice should read it. That's not me.
That's a small pool. Okay. Right here.
Where it says excerpt?
This whole bit here?
Yeah, she had.
Okay.
Really ASMR, really ASMR it up, dude. Get lean in there.
Okay. She had suspected it all along, and now she knew. He was a coward dressed in the uniform of a brave man, brave enough to cross 2 oceans and a continent to find her, to fight countless enemies, and yet, in the end, he was terrified. Terrified of her, to lie beside her, comforted by her as he wept, to show her he was small, for her to know that, and touch his cheek and whisper words softly into his ear. All of that was a nightmare. He took a deep breath of air, tasting the salt on his tongue, and closed his eyes, leaning into the spray as the Merciful picked up speed and sailed for the horizon. He was alone, and all was well.
Thank you. After it is read, both Kevins are in tears, and the assassin begs the president to take this thing out of him so he can never come back again. I love the little business with Patti and Kevin and the glasses.
Mm-hmm.
We know what happens next, and we'll talk about that. But where do you stand on this untitled romance novel?
Well, this is why. Not why, sorry. This is where I said I would pick back up with the stuff that happens with Dean. Because I didn't notice this. Obviously, I didn't notice this the first time. You'd have to have a pretty crazy memory to notice this. But they obviously read the ending of the book that I just read there. That is the version Patti has. And then I went back just out of curiosity and listened to the version that Dean read. And that one was, I just put it down in note version. He said the version Dean read was, he stood on the bow of the Merciful, the water stretching to the infinite horizon as he contemplated the impossible distance between them, but he would not stop until he found her. And that's like totally different to the version Patti had. Right.
Well, I think isn't one the beginning and one the end, kind of.
Right. And that's what my question was going to be. Was like, do you know whereabouts? I guess it all depends. Whereabouts in the book that is.
And I haven't done the huge deep dive on that. There's still a couple pages out there, like written that they didn't read or excerpts and everything. I just don't think there's too much to say. It, you know, he thinks he's a coward. He thinks that she figured it out, that he's a coward, even though he's dressed in uniforms and he fights enemies. In the end, he was terrified. He was terrified to get close to Nora, and really confide in her, to take her on, as it were. And he did what he had to do to escape. The merciful was his argument with her in the hotel room. And, it's beautiful writing. They know it's going to be analyzed a million times. It's beautiful. The boat's the merciful. I mean, kind of.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, we haven't had the boat analogy before in the show, so I mean, like in this way, right?
Yeah. Although it's interesting because we have had a few boats in general.
We definitely have had some boats.
The boat in Australia. I was gonna say then it would be a kind of weird ending if it was like he stood in the bow of the merciful, etc., and then it's like he reached down, and petted Fraser, who was next to him. It's like,
you said petted. I'm glad I didn't say what I was gonna say.
Yeah. And there's also the boat, the lorry, not reference, but there's obviously that boat as well. So there's at least 3 boats I can think of.
And 2 boats and a helicopter,
And 2 boats and a helicopter,
yeah.
So.
So I mean, it's just weird the way they did it, and that they name checked Millard Fillmore.
Yeah, I looked him up. I didn't know if he was significant. He's just a president, right? A former president. Yeah.
What number was that?
I'm gonna say 13th because that's the number that's in my head. But let me check. Yeah, there you go. 13th U.S. president.
Millard Fillmore and William Howard Taft. James K. Polk. Anyway,
was he? What year was the Millerites? Is there any crossover there?
I don't know, but I'm gonna read the next part.
Actually, I was just gonna quickly.
Yeah.
Ask you about the one line, where he says like, "Take it out of me, so we can't come back here." I assume the point is not so much the taking the specific thing. Like, it's not really about the key. It's more about. I mean, what is it about? It's about Kevin getting rid of that part of himself that's still dependent on this stuff, or
it's about him getting rid of whatever is weighing him down in the muck and the mire of wanting to come here, try to kill himself, shed his midlife crisis or whatever it is. You know what I mean? He realizes he's been wasting time trying to do this over and over again, when what he should be doing is figuring out probably how to make himself comfortable with being with Nora or being with another person. And, let's blow up the world so we never have to come back here again.
It did remind me.
Killing the international assassin, Kevin.
Well, not remind me, but it made me think of when Kevin's talking to Laurie and he says that he feels the most like alive when he's there, and like he feels good and he's excited to go there. And I don't know, maybe that's part of the issue. Because when Kevin says, take this out of me so we can't come back here, he makes it sound like coming back to this place is a painful thing that he doesn't want to do. Whereas we heard him say to Laurie that in a way he does want to do it. But, maybe it's that conflict between those 2 extremes that's painful. Or maybe that sentence made no sense. So
Well, I
losing
think
myself.
maybe he feels like he's a Superman there, and he feels like he can do whatever he wants. So he goes back in there to do things for other people, and that's not what he should be doing. Your inner self exploration isn't to help other people. It's to be a better person yourself. And
Mm.
sometimes you have to go all the way down there to figure out that how to help yourself. Do you know what I mean? And that's what I take from it.
Okay.
Um, I'm gonna go on to the digging into the Kevin part. Which, by the way, this is where I'll show my Lego leftovers. Beautiful, gorgeous Lego of Kevin digging into Kevin. To the sound of God Only Knows by the Beach Boys and under the Secretary of Defense's watchful eye, the president surgically retrieves the key from inside the international assassin. Before the assassin dies, he looks at the president and says, "We fucked up with Nora." Once the key is removed, and with our leftovers theme taking over, Kevin launches the nuclear weapons. He and Patti go to the top of the roof and hold hands as the rockets come raining down. I'm going to read this the last bit of the episode. Kevin wakes up alive and well on the Ark at Grace's ranch. He joins his father on the roof. Kevin Sr.'s faith has been shaken to its core as he asks his son, "Now what?" Yeah, that happened.
Mm-hmm. I don't know what I was expecting. And a part of you is expecting him to do it, but you're still surprised when he does it. And I don't know how that works.
What, the actual digging into the heart?
Right. Yeah, yeah. Because it's like, well,
Yeah.
how else are they going to resolve this? Like, that's what it's all been leading to. But you're still surprised. I guess this comes back to my question of, like, do you have any idea how any of this was filmed?
Just standard double screen stuff. You get a shaved, a bearded Justin Theroux doing all of his signs with like a body double there for the background shots.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get a bearded Justin Theroux doing the other side, and you tape them together. Old school editing. Tape them or.
I mean, I've seen stuff
here.
like this done before, but most of the time when you see it, it's on YouTube or something, and it's not really done to the full extent that it's done here.
Yeah.
I don't know how many examples you can think of in film that do it, but
there's a million. Including
but,
the greatest movie of all time, Back to the Future 2, did it a lot. So.
Yeah. I guess. No, you're right. But I mean, it's not even just the fact that they're in the same room. It's they get so close, and
yeah, it's just
like, it seems like they bit off a pretty, like, of all the stuff they could have said, like, okay, we're gonna do this scene where there's gonna be the both of them. How do we make this hard for ourselves? Let's have one of them dig some key out of the other.
Yeah, right. But it was beautiful. The Beach Boy song is beautiful. And I mean, with Kevin Sr. up on the roof, now what? If you have anything else to say or have any predictions for the series finale, The Leftovers, I'd like to hear them. And if you don't, that's fine too.
Well, I don't know. I mean, what I said last time was that I feel like I don't want to sound like a viewer who thinks they're entitled, but it just feels like we've got to go a little bit further than we did last time in season 2 to make this whole journey extra season worthwhile.
Right.
It feels like we have to take it one step further, and even though this episode was really good, for a lot of reasons, it was still sort of within the territory of what we know they're like allowed to do, and it's it's not stuff we haven't seen before. Like, we haven't seen the specifics of it, but the concept of it we've seen before. And so I guess what I'm expecting is for them to go a little bit further than just Kevin's mind, and maybe Nora's mind are exploring, or not. Maybe Nora it won't be in her mind this time, and she'll actually go somewhere. I just don't know, because they've got 1 hour to somehow.
It's a little bit longer than the 1 hour. It's a little longer.
Okay, that's
Yeah.
good.
Well, and think about, that the sentence you said, very good. You want the leftovers to go further than it has before.
Mm-hmm.
But the things it's really going good at furthering is, facilitating these kinds of discussions.
Mm-hmm.
Right? That's what I think. And I think you're going to like it.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy.
It is crazy. But I think that's all I have to say about the most powerful man in the world and his identical twin brother.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, if anyone is still watching, please, what are the things they need to do? Press like, share, subscribe.
Yeah, hit all the buttons.
Hit all the buttons. Thanks again for doing it. I can't believe it's almost over. Got a little upset the other day. I was like, "What? It's gonna be over soon." Hopefully we'll get your reaction to the Book of Nora up soon, and in another 18 weeks we'll get the review done for that.
Mm-hmm.
No, it'll be sooner. All right, everybody. Thank you so much.
Thank you.